Hello and welcome to the 2019 CX virtual event, Building a 360-degree view of your customer by leveraging CRM. My name is Mary Kate Maloney with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have a few administrative details to share with you, and then I'll turn things over to our theme speakers. First, we'd like to thank Huron for their partnership with today's event. They've been a wonderful thought leadership partner to Argyle and are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. So thank you again to Huron. We appreciate you joining us today. We welcome you to stay connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please use the hashtag ArgyleCX. You can also follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forum, and be sure to join our LinkedIn group, Customer Experience CX Forum. I also wanted to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we've curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from our members. Argyle is very proud and protective of this policy as it reflects our commitment to ensure the neutrality and the overall value of the content presented at our events. We've worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, please submit any and all questions that come up during today's event into the Q&A section of the interface. Following the panel discussion, we have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on these questions. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Scott Zielinski, Managing Director, Huron Consulting Group. We're pleased to have Scott with us to deliver opening remarks. Welcome, Scott, over to you.
Thanks, Mary Kate. Hello, everybody, and I'll just echo what Mary Kate said. We want this to make this as interactive as we possibly can for something like this. Sometimes that's not easy to do, but it helps to know whether we're hitting the mark or not on these. And so I will kick this off, and I'll give you a quick introduction of kind of why. But we travel North America mostly, and if I had a nickel for every time I heard a client wants to build a 360-degree view of their customer, I'd have some change. Let's put it that way. So, and we hear it a lot, and we ask them the logical next question: what does that mean to you? And I think it comes back with varied responses. And I think with our panel that you're going to talk to today, you'll hear it from different points of view, different points in their journey. And typically, then, you know, what we hear are things like, we thought if we built CRM, they would come, and it just doesn't typically happen that way. So stakeholder user adoption typically lags. We hear things that people don't quite understand what CRM is. The connotations to all of us are different. And so one of the things we want to do, and I'm going to lead off and I'm going to go really fast, is to just have you jump into some context setting of what we mean by CRM, and what does that mean to build a 360-degree view. It's used in our industry a ton, and so we'll kind of break down those meanings. So very quick list of topics. I'll do some introductions. We'll talk about the customer experience, and then we'll drive through what's a fairly generic customer life cycle. We've got many different industries represented on this call today. But we'll do it in such a way that is fairly generic, and I'm betting if you take a piece of paper, you'll be able to assess from your point of view, from your organization, how you'd want to address these. And we'll quickly go into how can you get started on creating a CRM program for you and your organization. So no commercials, but real quick, just so you know, if you haven't heard about Huron, we're a publicly traded company. Just the financials were just released, so just under $800 million company, consulting, management consulting, technology consulting, various industries. We have a commercial industry approach. We're deep in healthcare, higher education, life sciences. 24 offices around the world. 3,000 professionals work for Huron Consulting. We have a service line that's specifically focused in and around customer experience and CRM. I'm a part of that practice. And just a lot of projects, again, on the management consulting side, advisory side, as well as technical deployments on various platforms. That's the commercial. All right, this goofball. I wouldn't believe a thing this guy said. No, this is me. I'm managing director in our customer experience group. I've been doing this I just stopped at 25 years. The gray hairs in there are from my 3 sons, but a lot of experience, and it's all large consulting, small startups, and part of my job is crossing the country to talk to clients about how are they looking at, thinking about, executing on their CRM and their vision. All right, an old quote, by 2020, customer experience will overtake price and product as the key brand differentiator. Are you ready? Right, we're here. You'll see by Gary Sarkeesian, he's on the call. Senior VP Customer Experience, right? We see now customer experience officers, chief experience officers. So everything is about now the customer, which is where it should be, right? No longer can it be, I've got a great process, let's take that to the customer. You must step back and think through your customer's eyes and their lens to think about how are you going to go about addressing that in terms of your organization. So with any transformation, if we want to call it that, again, good consulting word, right? This is a program. This is not a project. This is not a one-time. I think, again, when you talk to these panelists, they'll talk to you about this is ongoing. This isn't something that you get done once and then you're done. And so like any transformational program, we need to set some goals. We need to identify some metrics. If we're going to do this, what's going to change in our world? Then we need to determine a roadmap to get moving on and get that developed. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be written in stone. It's always going to change, but that needs to happen. And then the biggest part still around CRM is adoption. Is the organization ready? Is the organization going to take on the whatever we provide? And we're in many clients where the best technical deployment is completed and executed, but they're not driving the adoption the way they want. So we'll talk about that here real quick as well. So if we back off, and I think what you'll find is in this conversation for today, for this webinar, right, we're not going to talk about platforms, right? We're going to back away from technology and platform solutions and talk about the business, what I like to call the business of CRM, and what does that look like? And the easiest answer to that is every way your customer sees you, right? So every stage in their life cycle. And so a lot of the framing of what that does, and this is generic, is to look at a customer life cycle. And I would bet you if you took a piece of paper and you went through this, these 5 stages would probably resonate with you, despite what industry you're in, despite your business model. So I'll spend a couple minutes here. The reach stage is typically starts with the universe of potential customers and ends with a prospect. If you're in a business-to-consumer industry, that's much different than, for example, we were talking to a chocolate distributor that sells to the top chocolate makers in the world, right? The universe of those potential customers is very different, but it needs to be addressed. And I would bet you if you sat down with executive leaders in your organization and you asked them, how are we doing around reach? You would get suggestions on where you are today and how you could do better. Acquire is essentially your sales methodology, your sales process. If reach produces a lead for you, acquire takes that lead and makes them a customer of yours. Different for different business models, but essentially starts with the relationship with that lead, nurturing that lead into a sales process and pipeline, forecasting that lead, and then hopefully closing it and making it a customer. Develop is a little bit unique in that we like to define that as it starts with a new customer, so someone you're onboarding, because typically what we find is our clients, that development of a new customer is different than an ongoing customer that they've had for a period of time. And so we sometimes like to separate this and say this is all about getting them onboarded, making sure that their experience is tremendous for them, If it's a project, it's delivering the first project. If it's a product, it's delighting them with that product, and getting them to a point where they're happy with us as being our customer. Retain is everything about keeping that customer. So all of your customer support, your service processes, making sure that if there's issues, they get addressed. That's the retain stage. And then inspire is sometimes a catch-all, but sometimes the most important, that says, now I've got a customer. They're beyond being new. How do I inspire them for other services, other products? How do we delight them and make sure that we grow them? Because you know there are other organizations that are going after your customer base. So we like this as a good way to frame out what you're trying to do in and around the business of CRM. And I'll start to move faster through here now, but this gives an example, and this is not fully everything there is in terms of capabilities, but this is some example capabilities that you would say for each of those stages of the life cycle, right, you would need in place. And what I will tell you is that depending on your business model, depending on your industry, some of these are more important than others. They're not all created equal. And so when you think about putting together a vision and figuring out what 360-degree view of your customer means, some of these you're going to need to be, you can be crawling, some of them you need to be walking, and some of them you probably need to be running, because it becomes a differentiator to your business. So I'll leave these out here just for you to take a quick peek at some of the things that you might think of in terms of those life cycle stages. And now if I can bring you back, and let's just bring you into a meeting room where you've got leadership in each of these areas, right? In the reach, it's typically maybe a chief marketing officer. In the acquire, it's your VP of sales or your sales leaders. Your developed, it's your COO, your operations group. In your retain, it's your customer support group. In the inspire, it's your R&D, right? It's those looking at what white space you can fill. And if you put them in a room, right, and you ask them 3 key questions, and those questions would be, here's current state, where do we need to go to delight our customers? If we go there, what metrics are going to change? Because something has to change in order for you to justify the investment. And then, you know, the question that we'd love to jump on is, if those first two questions are so obvious, why haven't you done it before? And that last one will start to get into what are the objections. And it's not always technical. People think it is, but sometimes that can be culture related. It could be business process related. It could be skills related. And all 3 of these questions need to be answered for you to be able to move forward and to put together a full plan. So what we typically have to do is, if you take each of those stages and you start writing down and brainstorming some of these, and then you start to put together what are the metrics for this, what are the obstacles, you come up with what we call, because we don't have a better word, value statements. And so this is an example list. I'll pause on the screen for you to take a quick look at them. But essentially what we'll do is create 20-ish statements, something you can easily do. This is typically a free-flowing conversation that works well with your organization. Everyone has lots of ideas when you brainstorm. And it starts to put together what are the thoughts of your leadership group, and starts to build the ownership from that level. And you create these statements. They're relatively easy to do, and then you got to do something with them. So just a quick example of what you can do with them is a quadrants here where you take a look at the complexity. That's how difficult it is to do these, and the value. What do your leaders believe is the business value with one of these value statements? And if you start to map them, and again, loosely mapping, this is not a scientific exercise. This is something that you can do again in the course of a couple hours with your leadership, and you can start to place them on this in these quadrants to understand where the highest priority items are. What should you be addressing? There's discussions, healthy discussions, arguments sometimes around what belongs in the low-hanging fruit quadrant, right? Those are the things that we all believe are high value and relatively low complexity. The phase 2 items might be those that are high value and high complexity because you've got to change a skill set. You've got processes that you need to fix. You've got to put technology in place. Probably a more expensive option, but still high value and something that we need to do. And then you can fill out the rest of the quadrants and say, all right, the ones in the lower right are low value and high complexity. That might be integration to get some customer information from a place that you really don't need it. And it might be expensive, but not have a ton of value. So that piece of 360-degree view of the customer may not be necessary, may be out of scope, and it's not something that you want. And these are good, again, good, healthy discussions to have with your organization. Out of this, right, you typically get kind of an idea of what you want to do generally, first, second, third, fourth. You start to identify what the success criteria might be for that. There's other projects, right? We're all busy. There's other projects going on as a part of what you're doing. But you start to identify, okay, what do we know we need to do to be successful? And if you start to identify success criteria, and I've got some examples on the screen, you start to see these are the areas that, again, you're getting leadership buy-in to say, these are the things we must do. And you've done it now in a way that you thoughtfully went through every stage of what your customer is going through. And again, I'm not going to drain this list, but it gives you an idea. And these put markers in. So ultimately, and I'm going to make a huge leap here, right? What you want to get to is a roadmap. And so the roadmap, and this looks more complex and more detailed than maybe it needs to, but it starts to identify what needs to happen first, second, third. It's not always about technology. You'll hear that from the panel today. Some of the foundational pieces of this can be done without technology. The platforms that exist today are certainly world-class and will help enable these functions, but it involves much more. And if you look at the top, and the shading is on purpose, right? If you look at that 360-degree view, customer view, in the early phases, you're not there yet, right? And so the shading is light. As you continue down your roadmap, right, the shading gets darker because you're starting to get there. It's going to take time, right? Your organization, your senior management, your users need to understand that. The stars that you see on there are those customer success criteria that you identified, because you can bet you're going to get 6 months into this or a phase into this, and someone from customer service is going to look at that and say, I'm not getting what I asked for. And now you've got a roadmap to tell them, I know you're not, you've got to be patient with us, it's coming. Look, here's what the overall roadmap looks like. And again, I hope this slide doesn't seem overwhelming. It's an example of a customer that we worked with for weeks, not months. You know, that's the other part of this. We're all in this ADD world. Things need to move fast. This cannot be months and months of planning and strategy to make this happen. The bottom chevron there around change management is also shaded on purpose, meaning we're talking here about getting ownership of this initiative early, and that's where you need to spend the most amount of time with senior management, with middle management, with all impacted stakeholders, and making the time to do that early in the process will allow you to spend less time on it later in your roadmap. And so, again, these are great questions to ask our panelists, but this is what we generally find as we're helping our clients build a vision and roadmap. A lot of information. This isn't as difficult as it might look. It's not as complex as you might think. It can be done in hours. It can be done in weeks. The key is to think through it at some level. Get yourself into a place where you can start. So I'm going to close, and then we're going to start to move it to our panel. But here are our key takeaways from all of this. We mentioned this earlier in the slides. The transformation is a program. It's not going to end. As soon as you put that roadmap out there, it's going to change. And you need to be aware of that, and you need to alert your senior management of that. You must back up and you must look at every single way you touch your customer in order for consistency, right? In order to make sure they're getting, and if you look at it through their lens, that is the most effective way to do this. Determine the CRM capabilities that are most important to you. You're undoubtedly hearing stories all over the place about where things have been effective for other organizations. You need to take that step to understand where is the business value and complexity with your organization, because it's different with every one of them. You then identify your success criteria, because you need to map that into your vision to understand when are you achieving those success criteria, because I'm here to tell you they're not going to happen immediately. They're not going to happen in phase one. They may take time for you to get there. Create the roadmap. It doesn't matter how pretty it looks. It gives you a starting point. We all know it's going to change. And then the thing we try to leave people with is think big when you start talking about CRM vision and roadmap. Think big, but you need to start small. The best way to start a CRM program is to get quick wins for the direct users. Don't start with middle or executive management. Start with the users, because if the data is not in there and the data is not correct from them, it hampers the entire adoption process. So think big. Start with small projects, and starting small allows you to move fast. All right, I'm going to start to introduce the panel now. Mary Kate, I think you put this, how people can ask questions. Please start to ask your questions. I'll ask them some, and then we'll move into audience Q&A. So I want to start with the panelists, and Lizzie, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Brian and then to Gary. But Lizzie, please introduce yourself. Talk about your title, and talk about where Guaranteed Rate is on their current journey with CRM.
Absolutely, Scott. Thank you. This is Lizzie Garner. I'm an Executive Vice President of Development Communication. I sort of run all of what I just heard Scott identify as change management in an informal sense for a mortgage company, large mortgage company here in the Midwest. We are about 1 year in for our true CRM initiative, and I was busy writing down notes because I think there are some steps that even a year in, we could go back and find some things we're struggling with today that we probably didn't have sort of the North Star we needed to get set off in the beginning. So I appreciate the information you shared and have some work to do to go back. We use our CRM to talk to our actual customers, borrowers who are refinancing or purchasing a home, as well as to our referral partners, realtors, builders, attorneys, who are also considered referral partners within mortgage transactions. And then lastly, and maybe uniquely, we also use our CRM for recruits. The backbone of retail mortgage lending are actually bringing in the loan originators who have individual relationships throughout the country. So we also use it to track and maintain relationships with our recruits who are our future loan officers. So again, about 1 year in and about 9 months since we cut off the ability to access our old sort of homegrown taped together solution. This is truly 1 year into a real CRM base for the entire company. So still learning a lot along the way, and happy to share some learnings that we've had to help others avoid some of those. Thanks, Scott.
That's great. Brian, where are you at your journey with Shutterfly?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Brian Border, and I'm the Vice President of Customer Relationship Management at Shutterfly. Hopefully most of you know who Shutterfly is, but we are the leading retailer for personalized products, and that includes everything from photo books to cards to calendars and gifts. Currently I'm leading a strategic multi-year cross-channel CRM initiative that's focused on growing our customer relationships over the longer term. And we're doing that primarily through the use of targeted marketing strategies. And to go into a little bit more detail about that, and also to give you a little bit of background on our journey, I would say, like a lot of organizations, at Shutterfly, we found ourselves playing some catch-up a few years ago when we stepped back to evaluate how effective we were in engaging with our customers in kind of truly meaningful ways that drove real business value. So we realized we had a lot of work to do to catch up and to create the experiences that customers were expecting from us and from other organizations like us. And so today we're kind of in the middle of a multi-year initiative that it's really about trying to transform our marketing program and all of our customer touch points by making better use of our customer data to develop those highly targeted customer communications that companies aspire to do. Essentially, we're looking at all our customer touch points. We're slowly but surely moving from a one-size-fits-all approach to a more personalized approach that's coordinated across channels. So no matter where a customer comes in, they're feeling like we know them, and they're getting consistent messaging. And just to wrap up in terms of kind of specifically where we are in the journey, so 2018 was really a big test and learn year for us. It was also an opportunity for us to build out some of the supporting capabilities to enable our CRM journey. And now we're in year 2 and taking a lot of those learnings and using them to really shape our plan and our approach for this year and the coming years.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Gary, do you want to introduce yourself and talk about your journey?
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Sarkeesian, Senior Vice President of Customer Experience and Professional Services for Pearson Education, but specifically my division is the K through 12 division. And we've just recently announced that our division is being sold. So we are actually being sold to an equity partner, and in about 30 days no longer be associated with Pearson. But it's exciting times for us because we're going to become a new brand in the marketplace. So we're all very excited about being able to establish ourselves as a brand new brand as we move forward in our journey in our business. And in the K through 12 space, we're very much a B2B customer. There's a finite number of school districts in the U.S. We also serve countries, continents that are multilingual and follow U.S. pedagogy, South America, Southeast Asia, and parts of the Middle East, for example. And in our journey, as we go forward, we really, in our business, we're a textbook-based business, as well as starting to transform ourselves into the digital space and into a digital software business. So not only are we transforming our business, but the education industry is also moving from print to digital. And as we go along that journey, it's really now taking our role of helping our customers and ushering them into the digital transformation world while learning ourselves how to become a software organization or a software-based organization. So having said that, the focus on customer experience for us is really around 3 broad categories: customer intimacy, operational excellence, and product excellence. And in our journey, today we're a longtime CRM tool user where we're in the midst of a project or a program gone kind of stuck in the sales forecasting piece, and we'll talk more about that as we get into the questions. And we're really starting to look at becoming or doing a refresh so that we focus on account planning. And also my experiences outside of Pearson, I have significant experience with other companies such as CA Technologies, Salesforce, and Cvent in implementing CRM solutions from startup to implementation as well. So I have a vast experience in that space as well as in the what we'll call the refresh stage of kind of redoing a CRM because it's stuck right now in a certain aspect of delivery. That's it, Scott.
Perfect. Thank you. So Brian, second question, I'll start with you because you all touched on it in different ways in terms of where some of your focus is. And Brian, you started to say by targeted marketing is where you kind of started. Can you talk about how you got to that and then what decisions were made to focus there versus other areas of how you touch your customers?
Yeah, I think for us it was really looking at where we really thought the biggest opportunity was to get the biggest bang for the buck kind of right out of the gate. And too often, like a lot of marketers, too often at Shutterfly, we are taking a one-size-fits-all approach, and we're assuming that whatever products or messages we're serving up is going to resonate with each and every customer. Of course, that isn't true. And a lot of our journey over the last year has really included a lot of in-depth analysis and the use of predictive analytics to allow us to use all the customer data we have at our disposal to serve up products and messages that are going to be more targeted and ultimately are going to resonate more with the customer and get them to either click or go visit our site. And ultimately, hopefully increase their purchase rates over time. So to get back to your question, I think it really was just when we looked at sort of all of our customer-facing channels, we thought some of the marketing channels were the ones that had the most opportunity, particularly within the email channel, which is one of our primary marketing vehicles. But over time, our vision definitely includes looking at other elements of the customer experience, be it in our prospecting efforts or the customer service efforts as well.
Great. And Lizzie, similar question. You're in this now a year and some change, and you talked a little bit about the recruiting function, which is important to you. How did you get to that decision of where to start and how to get moving at the beginning stages of this?
Sure. It's interesting as I looked and again listened to you at the beginning of the call. If I had to bucket it, we knew for us the best way to get some immediate value, which I would have called our phase one, was to get everyone aligned to a single source of data, a single point of truth. And for us, you heard me mention in my introduction that we're only 9 months even into shutting off all of those other sources and places where we used to allow people to get information. So for us, we knew early that the value that we wanted to provide, and we knew that CRM could help us provide it. We got to that place of what could we accomplish that is high value and low complexity first. So our initial was if we could get wins, which would be for a lot of our field management, the value in that was getting additional recruits. That's something that adds a lot of value to their direct deposit and to their business base in general. They're able to then help service more customers. We knew that if we could get them involved quickly, you had mentioned as well, like users, front-end users, getting them some value. That was one of the places we knew that we could get some quick wins. The same was true for our existing loan officers. If we could start to look at what would phase one be, having everyone look at that same data and know these were repeat customers, these were customers we were attempting to acquire. But much about what we just heard from Brian, I have to say that we're still very much in that phase one. Our goal for phase two, which is what we're starting to get into, is that higher value, but it's taken us more thought and more outside data to be able to ensure that we were meeting correctly that customization for people. So if you think about the mortgage business, us customizing to first-time home buyers, to veterans, to people to customize their experience to get them at the time in their buying journey or in their refinance journey, that's a huge, huge piece for us. But that was a high value initiative that took us more insight to be able to do. And I have to say, for those who aren't started or aren't further in, I think some of what held us back from that initial just even getting phase one done was that we weren't very clear initially about what we could accomplish quickly and what was value, and we had to have some discipline around all of our ambition to do all the things that we wanted to do with the CRM, all the things we had heard and saw that others were able to do. But what was to get very customized and clear for us was the discipline of what can we do first quickly and get that value to get people bought in, and start to layer on, as we just heard Brian say, what is that next beyond the one-size-fits-all approach, because we're still very much in that first bucket and working toward our second steps.
Yeah, and that's so true, right? It's a kid in a candy store, right? When you see what's available out there for you, and you just have to be selective that you don't bite off too much as you start to move into it.
Yeah, I believe someone told us at one
the
point that we were attempting to boil the ocean, which I felt like was okay. I hadn't heard that previously to about 12 months ago, but I found us doing that often throughout that phase one planning.
Great. And Gary, you're the veteran in this group in terms of where you've taken CRM. You use the term that there's parts where you are stuck. So how do you move past that? How do you get from you've done some initial work, now you're moving into additional, more advanced phases? How are you able to make that happen and in the middle of a acquisition?
Yeah, so that'll be an interesting go forward as we look at our business. I think the thing that we lost sight on when we say we got stuck, and whether we're in a middle of an acquisition or we're staying with the current company, the whole point is focusing on the big picture. And Scott, you kind of hit that a couple of times, related around what's our driving force in our particular business, right? We've got a limited number of customers. There's only so many districts. So it's all about retention and inspiring our customers, because the pie is only so big, and it's how much of that pie can we own, right? And if we actually step back from what we were initially doing, and this is so key in where a lot of implementations tend to go south, and this is why we're starting our refresh, is we had all the aspirations around what a CRM could do, and really focus on thinking big, and retaining our customers, inspiring our customers, and getting that 360 around all the different data touch points that we could gather. But what we forgot in that process is, and Scott, you pointed this out, the end user. And in this case, it was the sales guy, both inside and field sales. And we instead started listening to management, which isn't a bad thing. You've got to keep focused on that. But they zoomed right into, well, I'm struggling with forecasts. And that's what we ended up initially doing. And that doesn't help the sales guy. The sales guy at the end of the day wants to know that the CRM is actually adding value to his sales cycle, whether that's speeding up his time, lessening administrative work. I've been in implementation projects where if you listen to how leads get into the system, basically the sales guy is sitting behind a desk, and that's not their job. So what they ended up doing is giving it off to administrative assistants, or to what was called sales associates that were interns, because they didn't have time to do all the processes of getting leads into the system or updating opportunities because of the process itself. So it wasn't saving them any time. But forecasting was the big thing that the middle management and senior management wanted out of the system. And so you've got to be able to balance that and look at the think big picture. And in our case, our refresh is saying, no, the most important thing around retaining and inspiring is around a strategic account planning. And that includes looking at white space, customer success plans around adoption, license consumption, outcomes. Where are, again, B2B, where are the customers in a particular territory or market? Where are the successes? What are the governmental regulations? What are customers looking for in a particular market? And are we hitting on point with the products that we're trying to sell? Are we hitting on product or around the customer intimacy that customers demand? And that varies from market to market. And we lost sight of that because we got stuck in sales forecasting. So for us, it's going back to focusing on the think big in strategic account planning, and now incorporating various components of strategic account planning, which if we do that right, sales forecasting becomes a natural outcome of that. And I think that's something that people have to understand as they implement CRM.
That's right. Well said. I think middle management, senior management, there has to be some patience there, because you've got to put something in there to not just entice. It can't just be the stick, right, in terms of your sales force to get them to enter opportunities. You want to make it so that they need to, right? It has to be part of what they do in order to get that. And then once you get the data, now you can start to forecast. Brian, question for you. We haven't talked about it yet, but I think metrics were something that was identified at Shutterfly as a part of your deployment and how you were targeting success with your deployment. Can you talk about the role of identifying data metrics in what you've done to date?
Sure, and I think the use of the term patience that you guys just spoke about applies really well to our journey at Shutterfly as well. We've been really clear, like my team and I have been really clear from the outset that when we're fully implementing our CRM vision, over the longer term, we expect the primary benefits for us that will be realized from it is in the form of long-term customer value. And for us, that primarily looks like customer spend on a year-by-year basis and really over a multiple-year basis. And it also looks at, in addition to the customer spend, it also looks at purchase rates and conversion rates and whether we're able to move the needle on that and increase the speed and the frequency at which customers purchase. And so that really is a patience game. And so the challenge for us is how to show progress in the shorter term while keeping an eye on the longer term. Keeping an eye on the longer term metrics. So in the in the shorter term, we've identified a number of kind of more intermediate KPIs to help us track progress and give us a sense that we are on track for hitting those long-term goals. So at Shutterfly, that's everything. It's all sorts of engagement types of measures, everything from whether we're getting customers to come visit the site more often, if we're getting them to upload photos on a more frequent basis. Are they clicking on our emails or our display ads? Are they showing some level of increased engagement compared to where they were? And for us, if they're doing that, that's a positive indicator that it's going to benefit us over the longer term in terms of those revenue and conversion metrics. The other piece is also, as was mentioned by Gary, is that we too are trying to focus not just on having every interaction with the customer being focused in the immediate term about trying to drive purchase and trying to push product in front of them or promotions in front of them. That's still an important part of keeping our business strong. But in some cases, we know we have a portion of our customer base who just isn't going to be in the market to buy any of the products we offer at a particular time. So the question is, what other types of messages can we serve up, and what other types of conversations can we have with those customers that may not result in that immediate revenue, but can potentially drive increased engagement in that short term for the benefit of the longer term revenue and customer value.
That's great. Thanks. Lizzie, similar question. I know you're early, but what are some of the metrics that you've identified that you expect to change as a result of your deployment of CRM?
I appreciate the lead in, Brian. That did a good overview for us as well. If you think about home buyers as a general audience, you are only going to buy, a majority of consumers are only going to buy a finite number of homes, right? Repeat business wasn't always a way that we could measure. In the same way, I had come from a retail background and inspiring purchases or thinking of things like Shutterfly. I get my Shutterfly photo calendars every year in December, and I use them as gifts. But yes, I don't have a need for those again in January and February and March. That one calendar I bought for different audiences is what I needed. And the same is sort of true with home ownership or refinance. So for us, we started with some leading indicators, as you heard Brian talk about, that were our engagement rates with what types of things could we inspire engagement on, even if it meant you weren't going to buy a home. We could tell by looking at customer data. And again, because we were using a bit of a one-size-fits-all approach, we were maybe telling people who had closed 4 months ago about refinance opportunities, or the rate was changing and market rates were great, and it's not necessarily, and again, we're actually still finding some of this because we're not through that first quarter yet. We've been pivoting a bit on what other things could we measure to get some additional just engagement with customers. What was going to be content that they would engage with? And I'll use an example. If anyone's heard of Renovation Lending, which was typically thought of as coming out of some of what was the crash, that the homes that had gone into disrepair, that you could come in and buy one that wasn't in great shape and couldn't get through an appraisal and an inspection, but that we could help you finance it with the contingents that you would, of course, fix this home up. So we found that we had an opportunity to create, or at least provide engagement from customers, that they were interested in that type of content. So we've been able to lean on those types of just data and metrics that have come back. We've also started to record how many touches before we could get human engagement to come about. And again, this was with recruits, with loan officers. How often before we got their name would we need to engage with them to have them actually be interested in a conversation with a local recruiting manager, with a local sales leader? And those have been things that we've been trying to use as indicators, because we also know that the very best recruits in the business aren't going to change all of their clients and customers and referral partners to a new mortgage home without a lot of thought. So we had to start to find some of those, and I'll say that initially we didn't get all of those right. We had too many long-term metrics and not enough patience to wait for what that was, or are we doing things that are in the right order? So we did engage in some A/B testing. We found a way to integrate our social platforms in to be able to record with that client when we were targeting them with marketing, to be able to give us some additional insight. And I think we're still in the place where we're digging through, and now when you have access to so much data, part of it is getting very clear about what is our lead data telling us that we can get the biggest bang for our bucks. So sort of back to the process you talked about initially, what are things with fairly low complexity but with high turnaround? And renovation business is an example of that. We could create more renovation targeted marketing that people would engage with fairly easily, quickly. There's a lot of information out about that was keeping customers engaged with us, so that we could still work to manage and measure some of the long-term pieces.
That's great. Gary, you talked about it first. I think for this audience, can you provide other additional tips, tricks to drive adoption across the board, across all of your impacted stakeholders, in order to grow this and to make it as effective as you can at Pearson? Sure.
So, I think some of the things that you have to look at, and everyone kind of touched on that, that CRM isn't just for sales, right? It's not just for sales and marketing. So you have to look at all the different pieces and parts of your business and understand how they actually impact the customer. And that just even starts with, does the business even understand that? Does the accounts receivable team or the credit and collections team understand that they have influence on how the customer feels about your organization? And while we haven't touched on it, various types of survey metrics, whether you're doing MPS or you're doing Timken's C-score, being success, effort, and emotion, and correlating them together to understand the propensity of a customer to buy new product or the contentiousness of a renewal, and taking some of those metrics and applying that to all the different pieces and parts of your business is critical to make sure that as you roll out the various pieces and parts of CRM, that you're having some impact across the way. And that's why for us, again, focused on retention and inspiring our customers, it is about account planning. But within account planning, incorporates not just sales planning, white spacing, etc., but also customer success plans and blueprints, focusing on adoption and license consumption. How many licenses did they buy? How much are they consuming? And when does the contract come up? And are we in jeopardy because the sales guy can't sell more because the customer has only adopted 10 licenses out of 1,000, and oh, by the way, their contract renewal is coming up in 3 months, right? Very disingenuous when all of a sudden you're starting to reach out to your customer 3 months before a contract ends to start thinking about the adoption process and how you would adopt that. But from an internal perspective, it's looking at all the different users, whether that be the sales teams or whether that be the marketing teams for lead generation or whether that be the customer success teams from a adoption, from a post-sales, or your customer care teams from a technical support perspective, and intertwining your support, which what I would call, customer stability, and ensuring the customer stability is also all part of how does the CRM touch different components, because they all interact and they're all very integrated with one another, and everybody could reap, even from a small little project, that you want to touch various parts of the organization, even with one or two of the metrics that you're trying to drive, that you pick a project that touches those that touches very significant parts of your organization.
Thank you. Brian, similar question, internal adoption. How are you going about it? Any tips, tricks, advice for our audience?
Sure, and I think a lot of my tips are probably a little bit less specific to a CRM program. I think they're just more specific to implementing any type of major initiative at an organization. But for us, as we've expanded our CRM program over the last couple of years, including just moving it from an email-focused program to a multi-channel program, it's really required a much greater level of participation from a number of supporting teams, and that's everyone ranging from our channel marketing teams to our analytics team to creative to operations. And we're doing CRM at Shutterfly today in a pretty scrappy way. So we have a handful of dedicated folks, but for many of the other folks, we're asking them to take on this work on top of their day jobs. So it's required us to really make sure we are prioritizing our efforts to make sure that everyone's time is being used as effectively as possible to help move the needle on this program. But perhaps even more importantly, it's required us to really sell the benefits of this effort and get the team members excited to where they really want to participate. In a few cases, I've actually had people publicly thank me for inviting them to work on this project. Essentially, they've thanked me for putting more work on their plate, but they, at the same time, they see the value of it and are excited to be, working on something that is a big priority for Shutterfly and is going to really help our business grow over the longer term. The other element we think about a lot is about how are we doing with driving alignment among our stakeholders. And when I say alignment, I mean both alignment with our longer-term vision as well as our more immediate sort of next steps for this program. One of my own internal metrics is how well stakeholders are able to articulate our CRM vision and the progress we're making on it today. to be honest, at times it can be disappointing because I'll hear somebody talk about our program in ways that don't really perfectly jive with the way our team is thinking about it. But that's also a really good insight for me and my team to tell us that we have more work to do in terms of creating that common understanding and alignment across our various stakeholders.
Yeah, that's great. And resources, right? It's always an issue with any of these projects, right? That the people that your best people are the busiest people, and they're the ones that also need to play a role in these programs. And part of it is if you can make it fun, if you can make it interesting, and they feel like they have a role in defining it, you'll get that participation. Lizzie, absolutely. I know you had some specifics in and around what you've done to drive adoption.
I do. I could share just quickly a few of our audiences, and this was very deliberate for us to understand from front-end users what they would get out of it. We knew that our CRM would, in the way we use it, would typically only be as valuable as the folks who were updating it and finding an ability for them to use it on a daily basis and make it part of their everyday, which is, of course, never easy. So we took a look at what we were hearing as feedback. So as a quick example, loan officers who have been wanting, based on customer feedback, to be able to text message with customers. It's an incredibly scary thing for us, text messaging from personal devices and from all of the different compliance elements within home lending became a really scary thing for us. And what we were able to do was integrate with a partner that would allow us to use text messaging for some loan status and fairly routine things if people would do it through the CRM. So it was something that drew loan officers to want to use the CRM if they were someone driven to want to text with their customers. Similarly, for our sales folks, we allowed them to use video messaging capabilities. So versus leaving voicemails, if you were cold calling, you'd be able to leave these video voicemails and send them out to customers through the CRM if you were willing to do it that way. And we found within each one of our audiences, customer feedback between what they were opting into and opting out of, and were they getting either too much or too little, or did they somehow get on more than one loan officer's database and they were maybe getting doubled? They could choose who they'd want to continue to receive things from versus who they didn't. Even our referral partners, I mentioned earlier our realtors. Our realtors we had found in general, and we knew this before the CRM, but we always were trying to find ways to maximize the partnership with them. Generally, realtors are finding themselves at a disadvantage technologically. The personal broker firms and realtor firms aren't keeping up technology-wise to allow realtors to feel like they're really on the cutting edge. So this CRM allowed them some plug-in with our loan officers to create things like co-branded marketing, so co-branded flyers, co-branded emails, which then made our, again, loan officers want to use it so that they could provide that value to realtors, and realtors wanted to use guaranteed rate because they were able to have a platform that allowed them to even look better. And like we heard talked about in other areas, Gary talked about using it for forecasting. Certainly our sales management, through both the recruiting aspect of it and finding a way to capture those recruits that they had been calling and dripping on for years to try to, come work for us, guaranteed rate, that as well as what they could do to get insights into our not only recruiting pipeline, but sales pipeline, what could be early indicators of things going well in your area. The forecasting piece certainly came in it for them. So our marketing team, the value and the focus of what kind of collateral within each channel was most effective allowed them to focus and make sure they were using kind of the highest and best use of their time. So we really did spend a lot of time in that first period listening to user feedback and determining what could we do to get everyone some wins. We knew that if people had to go there and we could drive features through the CRM, that people could increase adoption in that way. So we did have some successes there that I'm pretty proud of.
That's great. All right, last question from me. We're going to open up the audience Q&A. I'll start with you, Gary. Rapid fire here. In one sentence, your best piece of advice for those thinking about diving into this CRM journey.
The best piece of advice is to, again, as you pointed out, Scott, think big, start small, but make sure when you start small, you are touching many different parts of your organization so you're not stuck in one part of the organization.
Great. Brian, same question.
Start with your strategy. What type of experience do you really want to create for the customers, and then figure out what capabilities are needed to support that and get you there.
Lizzie?
And mine would be, don't wait. It only made it longer and harder for us to unwind the longer we tried to whiteboard every answer to every solution. So if you can get that framework that we've heard today, kind of think large and know that you have a general plan, stay nimble. You'll make changes as you can and need to, but if you wait to whiteboard every possible journey, I couldn't tell you the days that we wasted that one little journey of this, does it go this way or this way, or could it go these 7 ways? Stop. Just get started, and you'll be able to adjust if you have a good, solid vision.
I agree. All right, Mary Kate, I'm going to turn it back over to you to open this up.
Perfect. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Scott, for doing such a great job moderating. We're now going to review some of the questions that were submitted by the audience during the discussion. So the first question we have, how do you handle it when your company tends to work in silos?
This is Lizzie. I can take that one.
Oh, okay, and then I'll follow on.
I would just say that we, in the mortgage business, are kind of known for siloed approaches. Sales, the arch nemesis of our processing and underwriting and ops and all the different kind of components played. Someone like myself who manages and has no singular stake in I am not an underwriter sales processor. I am change management, communication, and development for all. This was a project that, being closely tied to, allowed me to help negotiate a whole lot of the otherwise siloed groups that all don't always speak the same language and have the same values. So if there is someone, sort of a bipartisan human who could run this, I think some of our initial concerns in our other attempts were because they were being run by marketing and it felt like it was going to be only that way, or it was run by sales, it was only going to be that way. And so I'd recommend a kind of intermediary, someone who can see the larger picture and help to negotiate between the silos.
And to add on to that, for our organization, siloed means I'm doing something and I really don't care how it affects up and downstream. So I toss it over the wall and say, you know what, figure it out, but this is what we're doing. So we had to break down those barriers through really outlining the effects that people had in doing things, sticking their heads out of the hole, so to speak, and looking around to see how the effects were, what was actually happening up and downstream of the process. And the way we did that was when we started when we're starting our refresh projects, what we're calling our customer-focused program, is really building work streams that are truly cross-functional, right? So when you're starting a specific work stream, if it's faster issue management, it's not just the tech support or your customer service teams, but you have representation across the organization as part of being cross-functional. Once you get that cross-functional team together, the barriers start to naturally break down over time. It's not going to happen overnight, but over time.
And at Shutterfly, similar to what Lizzie talked about, we definitely have a channel agnostic person leading that in the form of me and a couple of my team members. So that in itself helps to reduce some of the channel specific silos that exist. But even more than that, a key thing for us has been to develop a common set of metrics for this initiative that we're all equally accountable for, and holding each team accountable to that. And then I would say, similar to what Gary was talking about, we started our CRM initiative in a more sort of channel by channel approach because that was where we thought we could get the quickest win, just by optimizing within each of our customer facing channels. But similar to what Gary was saying, we're now moving to a point where we are designing strategies together with a cross-functional team across all the different customer-facing channels so we're working together to design cross-channel strategies that we're all accountable for implementing and, of course, measuring against.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all. So the next question we have, what was the best approach to data migration when changing from one system to a new CRM?
I think with that silence, it says something about that question. For us, and from my experiences from other companies, the most obvious is just don't port data to port data. This is the opportunity really to look at, especially from existing an older CRM to perhaps a different kind of CRM or a upgraded CRM, that this is the opportunity to look at the data that you have, because I guarantee it's not clean, and not just clean the data, but then put in governance processes that will maintain that data as clean as it can get, right? But it is truly looking at it from, all right, we're just not going to port it, because then you're replicating bad data in a brand new system that is basically going to go nowhere. But this is the opportunity to put in a governance process, clean the data, but then put in governance processes of how I can continue to maintain the cleansing of that data or keep it clean.
And to address that question in a slightly different way, I mentioned earlier about really starting with your strategy and then figuring out what capabilities you need to effectively get you to that end state customer vision. And data is a really big part of that, and we have a good amount of data, customer data, particularly customer behavioral data, that's available to us just by the nature of our business. But as we thought through what is the end state in terms of the types of communications we want to have with customers and the types of experiences we want to create for them, what data do we need that we maybe don't have today that will help get us to that end state? So it was both an opportunity to look at what data we have that we could be using better, but also how do we supplement that with additional data points, and that may be in some cases that's external data that we want to get access to. In other cases, we are working on implementing a more robust collection of customer preferences so we can take customer inputs as well to help shape the experience in a way that will delight them.
And this is Scott. I just want to add that this is a great question, right? We talk about stakeholder adoption and growing that. One of the number one things that we see in failures in and around CRM deployments is bad data, right? Because if people don't trust it, it's one thing getting them to use the system. If they don't trust the data, it will not succeed. And so to Gary and Brian's point, you better make sure that data is right and accurate, because you will lose them, and you just don't get too many strikes in this in terms of growing something like this and making it successful.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all so much. That is the end of the time we have. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us today for this fantastic virtual event. Thanks again, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.